From the Citizens Bank studio, I want to welcome you to the Ricky Matthews Show. And I also want to welcome our listeners from the Delta, Mississippi Delta, and from the Jackson area, along with our friends and listeners from the Mississippi Gulf Coast on this expanded Thursday for the Ricky Matthews Show. From the Citizens Bank studio, we're so happy to have them here as the primary sponsor for this show. They do great work in the community, and I'm thrilled to have them. We're thrilled to have them as a partner here at SuperTalk Mississippi Media. Listen, it's been a lot of fun this time of year. A lot of people out spending time in the outdoors on Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews that airs on Mondays at lunch. We talk a lot about this time of year and what it means. It's not about the shooting. It's really about the camaraderie and the family and the storytelling and the generations getting together. A lot of people are doing that. A lot of people just taking a deep breath. This is that time of year where you reflect on the year that just passed, and amazing how fast this year has gone by, and begin to sort of reflect about the year coming up. So I love this time of year. I've really enjoyed this time of year for most of my life, and again, a great, wonderful time for reflection. We've got a great guest today. We're going to have this man for the full show today, someone I've enjoyed getting to know over the years, and if you don't know Brad White, you'll get to know him really well during this show today. But he's the current executive director for the Mississippi Department of Transportation. He's got a distinguished career, which, again, we'll remind you of that here in just a second. But without any further ado, let me bring my friend Brad back into the conversation. How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
It's good to see you. Are you sitting in your office in Jackson?
We are. I'm in Jackson, yep, at the MDOT Administrative Building.
You know, it's been fun staying in touch with you over a bunch of years, but you've had tremendous experience working with Thad Cochran and Cindy Hyde-Smith and Governor Reeves. You've had some great experience. In a lot of ways, as I made the point the first time that you and I talked, it really prepared you well for this position, because when you were the executive director of MDOT, you got to hit on a lot of cylinders, because funds are coming from different places. There's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot that needs to be done. And you really got to be all in to do this job and do it well, don't you?
Yeah, and I've been very blessed. I've been blessed with a lot of wonderful opportunities and opportunities to work for a lot of wonderful folks that came from different walks of life. And it was kind of funny. You know, I started out here almost 25 years ago with Commissioner Hall as his assistant when he was first appointed by Governor Fordyce to be Transportation Commissioner, and then left there and was party chairman and went to D.C. with Senator Cochran, Senator Hyde-Smith, worked for the governor, the state audit department. And it did kind of give me, looking backwards upon all that, it gave me a perspective across a lot of different lanes, all of which kind of converge here. So I do think that it was, preordained, I guess you'd say, and planned for me to have all of those perspectives to help me in the position I'm in right now. So hopefully it's worthwhile for the folks of MDOT.
Hey, listen, just a kind of a quick side note. In my drives to Jackson over many years as publisher of the Sun Herald, and then later in my hunting life, to spend a lot of time in the Mississippi Delta, going north on 49 was grueling for way, way, way too long. It was just grueling. The thing we used to say on the coast is that we thought legislators did that on purpose, that they didn't invest in Highway 49 so people would not come south to what they considered the sinning Gulf Coast. But, we joked about that. But the fact is, finally 49 is finished after a bunch of years. And, boy, it's a pleasure to drive on that now, my friend.
Well, through Rankin County. Well, I think I'm probably the first director that's had to commute 49, because I grew up in Simpson County. And so for the first 20 years of my work life, I traveled up 49 from Jupiter, Mississippi, all the way up to Jackson. So it has been nice what's been done from like Jerry's Fish House north to the Stack. We have a contract underway now from that same point south to the Simpson County line that'll totally rehabilitate that 4-lane highway stretch and make improvements through there. So we hope to make it even a nicer ride for those people that have to commute north from the Gulf Coast and all points between Jackson and the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. But, I think removing the trees and creating some shoulders on the road, it's safer. That's for sure. It's a lot safer drive than it used to be. And that stretch through the southern part of, the south of Jackson right there, that stretch was brutal for a long, long time. Yeah. and it's smooth as silk now. It's good.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, we can get where we need to get sooner in these days than we used to. There used to be a lot of gridlock there that's not there anymore. But when you think about the needs of the state, Brad, I mean, when you think about bridges and roads, man, we've got our work cut out for us, don't we?
Yeah, and 49 is a good example of that's the type of projects that we need around the state. Projects that are designed to increase the capacity of the roadway, increase its efficiency and safety, and the manner in which it's able to carry the volume of cars that we have in 2024 coming up. But due to a lack of funding, about 12 years ago, the commission had to basically have a moratorium over those types of projects because all of the money we had was being put into the rehabilitation of the existing system, and make sure that we're maintaining the investment that the taxpayers have. So we weren't able to respond to the growth as well unless there were extra federal funds made available for projects like 49. But luckily, here with the last reauthorization of the Federal Highway Administration, thanks to, by and large, to Senator Roger Wicker, Mississippi received an extra $1 billion over the course of that 5-year authorization, which has allowed us to restart that capacity program and to try to prepare projects like 49 around the state where those needs are. And the legislature stepped right in and has contributed quite a bit of funds for those projects. And right now, just in the 3 coastal counties alone, we've got about $380 million worth of capacity type projects that are underway from Hancock County, Harrison, and Jackson. And there's more to come around the state. So it's an exciting time.
And Brad, the role the federal government plays in that is just incredibly undeniable. And you would think that we've gotten some focus on infrastructure, but for so long we weren't as focused on it as we needed to be. I mean, I'm saying as a country. And there are so many debates and issues, so many polarizing issues that sort of get in the way of the kind of conversation we should be having in Washington. But the fact is that since we're spending some money in infrastructure today, when they start to really assess the where we are today relative to where we need to be, when for example, you look at the number of bridges that need to be repaired or replaced across America, we're talking about hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars need to be spent on infrastructure. Do you think the conversation's where it needs to be there and that we'll see more funding coming this way in the future?
I think we're getting there, certainly within Mississippi. I think there is an interest from our state leaders outside of the Transportation Commission to address our infrastructure needs and to look at how we invest that. But to give you an example, when I came back as director, MDOT's budget was the exact same dollar amount that it was when I left MDOT 16, 17 years earlier. The taxpayers have an asset in bridges and roads of over $65 billion. And for all those years, we had an annual revenue or annual budget of about $1.2 billion with which to try to maintain and enhance it. And so when you're looking at an asset that voluminous, that size, finding a reoccurring stream of revenue with which to address the needs and plan for the future, I mean, it becomes quite a task. And, you mentioned this earlier about the role of the federal government. I think that our state leaders are finally figuring out, while MDOT is a state agency, we really implement a federal program. Everything we do is in partnership with the Federal Highway Administration, and our standards are by the Federal Highway Administration standards, whether it's an interstate or a state highway, U.S. highway. So it is a core function of government, and it's something that government is tasked with delivering to the taxpayers. And I do hope that we see that conversation grow in the coming session about how are we going to provide for this core function of government. Because while the one-time money that the legislature has been giving us is great, sooner or later the one-time money is not going to be there. And we have to have a stream of revenue with which we can properly plan and which the industry can properly plan how to implement basically a construction program into the future.
Yeah, America kind of got off center a little bit when it didn't make reinvesting every year a major priority, because I remember seeing it, and I don't remember the numbers on it, but I remember seeing as it related to the Pops Ferry Road Bridge, which is not a state highway or a federal highway as well. It's a city-owned. Maybe eventually that will be resolved. But the fact is, you look at the needs for America, how many bridges are right on the brink of not being even usable? we've got some serious problems in America, and those, as an extension, Mississippi also has some work to do, doesn't it?
Now, the good news, I will say, when you look back to 2017 at the bridge crisis we had here in Mississippi, I was in Senator Cochran's office at the time. Those bridges were on the local systems. They were county bridges or city bridges that were failing inspections and needed to have an investment. The taxpayers can rest assured that the bridges on our state system are in much better condition because we do have the federal matrix that we're required to hit in their inspection and upkeep and maintenance and all of that for them. So we do a pretty good job of taking care of the state bridges. And thanks to programs like the Emergency Road and Bridge Program that you're familiar with, the legislature did a few years back, we've been ticking away at that bridge issue that we have at the local system. But the needs, I mean, even at $100 million a year, the needs, I think our applications sometime come in on average between around 800 million, worth of needs.
That's really incredible, which means you got to maintain what you've got, and if you don't, it will degrade very
Absolutely.
rapidly. We're having a visit with Brad White, the MDOT Executive Director. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. From the Citizens Bank studio, I almost said Foundation studio, which is what I say for SuperTalk Outdoors on Mondays. We were visiting with my friend Brad White, who's the Executive Director for MDOT, the Mississippi Department of Transportation. And I always enjoy visiting with him. We're friends. I watch him closely. You have really developed a lot of friends over a long year of working in the public sector. I would challenge the number of friends you have, Brad, with anybody.
Well, I'm blessed, to be sure. It's a good business to be in, and your paths cross with a lot of wonderful people. And Senator Cochran used to always say that if you want people to help you get what you want, you help them get what they want. Yeah. And so that's kind of been what I've tried to do, and I think it's paid off in building strong relationships.
Yeah, Zig Ziglar used to say something similar. If you want to get what you want out of life, help people get what they want out of life, and
that's right.
It makes a real big difference. And you and I in our last visit had the opportunity to talk about Thad Cochran and the incredible statesman he was. But having the opportunity to work with him, to see the role that he played after Hurricane Katrina, Thad Cochran, for people who don't or fully appreciate what being chair of the Appropriations Committee meant to coastal Mississippi and Mississippi for that matter after Hurricane Katrina, this guy was hitting on a lot of cylinders, wasn't he, Brad?
He was. He was a hard worker and, the quiet persuader. And he was a true definition of strength under control, Yeah. And when Katrina happened, I mean, he used all the relationships and the equity that he had built up in the relationship accounts around Capitol Hill to come to bear and help deliver for his home state, And he did so in a very humble manner, I thought.
Well, I meant that when I said that the experience that you got, whether it be Department of Audit or with Thad Cochran or Cindy Hunt-Smith or with Tate Reeves now in this role, or going back over 20 years to think that you actually started your career working with Commissioner Hall there at the Department of Transportation. To think that the budget's the same, that still blows my mind to think about it, because you think about the new roads and highways we're wanting to build, that we are building, and the massive amount of maintenance that is required. How could it be that the budget, I think you said with the most recent authorization, it incrementally went up some, but at the end of the day, that's amazing to me. If you just factor in inflation, your budget's way less than it used to be.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, primarily, we've been funded historically by the diversion of fuel tax. And the fuel tax hasn't been adjusted since 1987. So that, was a lot to do with it. Vehicles, of course, get better gas mileage now. They drive further, so the fuel consumption may be down. As you see the growth of electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, you'll continue to see that. So I'm hopeful that this next legislative session will have a conversation that starts on what should be the new model. And let me be clear, I completely reject the notion that we have to raise taxes to fund our transportation infrastructure, because I really think if our government got back into the business of funding the core functions of government first, before going into any pet projects or other notions that our legislators get pulled at from different interest groups, I think that there's enough money there to take care of our needs. I mean, I think if we had an extra $100 million a year in dedicated revenue for our capacity program, where we could start ticking away at enhancing our system where it needs to be built to accommodate traffic 20 years into the future, so you don't have situations like Highway 49 anymore. I think we've got around a $300 or $400 million shortfall in maintenance, paving, rehabilitation of a $65 billion investment. So I think that there's a way to create that type of dedicated revenue stream among the current budget that the state has. It's just going to take the will to put the money to infrastructure and this purpose, as opposed to having it there to dole out to other interests,
And that's going to take leadership, certainly conservative leadership to be able to reach a goal like that. It's it's interesting if you freeze frame it for a minute. What state government has become, in a lot of respects, we never planned it to be that way. It's just the snowballing projects that all came together, and at some point someone's got to put the brakes on and say, okay, now let's look at where we are, and let's do some zero-based budgeting. And that's hard to do politically, isn't it?
That's right. But infrastructure touches everybody. Yeah. Every conversation that I've had as director of MDOT with the Mississippi Development Authority has obviously been from some economic development project that's looking at locating within the state of Mississippi, and one of their first needs is some type of enhancement to our transportation system. And so, I mean, it's key to economic growth. I mean, it's key to the development of our communities. It certainly is a core function of government that the taxpayers who pay the taxes expect their government to deliver to them a system that works and that works efficiently. And so I'm very encouraged by what we hear out of the legislative leadership. I can tell you we have no better partner from the Department of Transportation standpoint than Senator Jennifer Branning, who's been the chairman of the Senate Highways and Transportation Committee. We look forward to working with who I expect to be the chairman of transportation would be Representative Massengill. He was the vice chairman leading up. Speaker designee Jason White and Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann have just been tremendous heroes to us and wanting to meet with us and look at the needs and have conversations about how to deal with it. We wouldn't have gotten the extra funds to build the $380 million worth of projects that I was just mentioning on the Gulf Coast without their leadership. And of course, Governor Reeves, as of last year, had infrastructure proposals that he was putting out that would call on the legislature to make major investments to our transportation system and our ability to further it. But if I may, I want to say one thing that we've done differently that I hope will give the legislature more confidence in putting investments in MDOT. Before they always seemed to have concerns over if they gave MDOT money, how do we know that that money gets to the projects? How do we know that they weren't going to build a building with it or buy equipment or cars or raises or whatever with it? So a couple of years ago, Ricky, we worked with the Legislative Budget Office to have created in the Department of Finance and Administration, which, as you know, is an agency that reports to the governor, not to MDOT or the commission. We had created there separate accounts. That is the MDOT capacity account, the MDOT paving and maintenance account, the MDOT federal match account. And so the legislature can now divert funds there, can have full faith that by the power of law, the only way that we can draw down that money is for it to go to its intended purpose, which would be a maintenance project or a construction project. And they no longer have to worry about regardless of who the director is or who the commission is. We have a system in place now that they can contribute to and know that the money goes directly to whatever project it's assigned to. And so I'm hoping that will help increase their confidence in their ability to give money and to know that it goes to what their constituents want it to go to.
Right, that's really a smart approach. Was that something you put in place? Or how did
I'm going to give credit to the Legislative Budget Committee. I mean, when we were talking about the investments that the legislature was wanting to make and how to best make those transfers of funds happen, this kind of came up organically by the staff of Elbow. But immediately, I saw that other advantage because it only made sense because it's so transparent. And it allows for everybody from the governor, the lieutenant governor, speaker, and any member of the legislature to know that whatever they vote on to send to MDOT, that while it sits in that account, it's just like the lottery money. We only can draw down when it's time to pay it on to a certain project. And so 100% of those funds get put to its intended purpose, regardless of who the commission or the director is. So I'm hopeful that that helps a lot to enhance our ability to have a conversation, a real conversation about, okay, now that we've got the system in place to get the money to the projects, how now are we going to come up with a model? What model are we going to use now that's going to generate the funds to go to those accounts to get the projects underway? And I look forward to having that conversation next month.
I think that's a super smart approach. I think about nonprofits, for example. Some people might be hesitant to give to a nonprofit because they're not sure of how much money they give is going to be paying for administration and marketing and other things. And when nonprofits are smart to say that 100% of them, we're going to find sources for administration, but we're going to make sure that 100% of the giving that comes in is going to go to this need, whatever it might be. That's such a smart approach because it gives people confidence that they can give. And the same thing's true for the legislature. I mean, they want to know, MDOT over many, many years, there have been reputations along the way, well earned, that the money would go into a black hole and not necessarily get accounted for in the way that the intention was. I think that's a smart approach. That is an incredibly smart approach. And I think it will for people who understand how that is, because there's always people going to raise questions about these things. And for you to be able to come back to them and say, look, we've put safeguards in place, in fact. So if you pass this legislation, that money's going to that account and it's going to be used for those purposes. I think that is a really, really smart approach. Hey, when we come back on the other side with Brad White, we'll talk a little bit more about the future. What kind of goals does Brad and his team have? And he's got a big team, incidentally. We should probably talk a little bit about this great team that he's got. But we'll continue our conversation with the executive director of MDOT here in just a second. See you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with my friend Brad White, who's the executive director for the Mississippi Department of Transportation, MDOT. A really, really necessary organization, really important organization. We're going to come back in just a second and hear from Brad about the future and where he sees MDOT headed and the challenges of aligning priorities for the state. This is always going to be a challenge that we have, but it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about that. I wanted to reflect just a little bit, incidentally. I had a great conversation with a friend of mine who spent some time with Haley Barber recently. And, for people who are not cued in, Haley had a really serious car wreck about a year ago, Brad. I'm trying to remember now. About a year ago.
Within the last year, yeah, I think so.
He got injured pretty severely and has had a long rehab. And I've had the honor of staying in touch with him throughout that time. And but they saw Haley, in fact, in the last couple of nights, and he was on his game. So he's coming back from what was a pretty, very, very difficult challenge for him to recover from. And someone said to him, I think, that he's never retired, that if you retire, you die. I can see Haley, working to his last breath. He's so solid and got so much to contribute to this state and to our nation, for that matter. But you had the opportunity to be the chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party and develop a relationship with Haley Barber. We're lucky that he was in that role when he was in that role, obviously because of the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, but also we're just lucky to have him still contributing to our nation, the work that he does, and he does a lot of work these days. But he was a great inspiration for you, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. It was an honor to be able to be chairman of the party under him because of all our governors. He was probably the most political. He had been the national Republican chairman. He had been Reagan's White House director of political affairs. And so, being able to watch him and have conversation with him and learn from him was a great opportunity for me. And he was much like Senator Cochran, for somebody that, if you looked at Governor Barber's resume, would be one of the most partisan people you could ever meet. He was probably one of the most successful outside of maybe Thad at being bipartisan. The entire time he was governor, he had a Democrat-controlled House. And for the majority of the time he was governor, he had a Democrat-controlled Senate as far as the members. And when you go back and look at the accomplishments he made, not just with Katrina, which is what he will always be remembered for, but tort reform and all the other things that enhanced our state and moved us forward, he did so working hand in glove with a lot of conservative Democrats, and he knew how to govern, and there's an act to that, or an art to that, that we could do to have a lot more of these days.
Well, Haley and I had the opportunity to work closely with him. I mean, obviously I knew him well before Hurricane Katrina, but certainly after Hurricane Katrina, I wrote the foreword to his book, and I'm privileged to have had the opportunity to do that. But it wasn't until I read the manuscript of his book, I knew what was happening on the ground, and to some extent, I knew that he was spending some time in Washington, but I didn't realize how many times he went to Washington and the work that he was doing to align this bipartisan effort. And I can't help but think about stories that he told me about when he worked in the White House for Reagan, when he had Tip O'Neill and Reagan sitting together, at the end of a long day and having a drink together, and him being able to be in the room and watch these two men enjoy being together and having respect for one another and all of that. Man, that's missing from national politics today. And so Haley learned at a time when in order to achieve your goals, you had to have bipartisan support for what you were doing. And that experience that he gained from Reagan and all the other work that he had done, it's funny that Musgrove said of him that he was a lobbyist, and that's the reason he shouldn't be elected governor. And the fact that that one trait in him, this incredible lobbyist he was what came to fruition after Hurricane Katrina. And then, he brought Democrats and Republicans together. What he did for Mississippi is undeniable. And in fact, he helped Louisiana in a lot of ways because of the very sort of basic approach that he took to developing relationships and helping people understand what it was going to take to rebuild Mississippi. What a great leader he was. And you got a chance to learn from him. You got a chance to learn from Thad. You go back in your history. I think all of that just really culminates well in this role that you have today. Do you find yourself telling yourself that you've found sort of your dream job? Is that kind of how you see your current role?
I do. I mean, I really enjoy what I'm doing. There's nothing else at this time that I can even imagine doing other than this. We do have a really good team here. MDOT's full of professionals that take their job seriously and that do it not for the money, but for the public service. I mean, talking about Katrina, Governor Barber himself would tell the people that the group of folks that were in front of the National Guard and Highway Patrolmen and all of the others that were on their way down 49 to try to get to the coast to deliver the help were MDOT personnel that were cutting the trees and clearing the way all the way down there. So MDOT has our own system of first responders that are there during tornadoes. When the weather is at its worst, MDOT's at its best, making sure that the other first responders, fire trucks, ambulance, police, are able to get through. And then you look at the engineers that we've got. One of the very rewarding things, I think, for employees of MDOT is they're able to work on something that's tangible. So they're always able to drive by and look at whether it's the Greenville Bridge that goes over the Mississippi River, and say, I had a part in that, or this highway, or whatever. I mean, I still hear old engineers talking about their time working on I-55 in Jackson whenever it was being built. So it's a great place to work. And you had mentioned looking to the future. I'm very excited about our future. For starts, we're getting a great new commissioner for the Southern District, Charles Busby, who's been a wonderful partner of ours as chairman of transportation in the House for the last several years. He'll represent the Southern District. Commissioner Willie Simmons was reelected in the Central District, who's been a wonderful partner, was chaired transportation in the Senate, and has been a pleasure to work with. And then John Caldwell was reelected in the Northern District. And so I think together we have a unique set of individuals that make up the team of MDOT that bring various different perspectives to bear that work well, I think, when we're trying to come up with common sense solutions and collaboration. One of the things that I think Senator Cochran and Governor Barber both taught was governing is an ongoing process. Legislating is an ongoing process. You never get completely where you need to be. You have to work, you have to compromise, you try to build a coalition of people that arrives at the best result you can get at that moment, and then you live to fight another day and try to take it further up the mountain the next time around. And so that's the approach that we try to take. And I think we've made great strides in the last 2 years, and looking forward to the next session and hopeful to be able to climb the peak a little bit more and stake another flag.
What I've noticed about you, and I've said this to some extent when we were kind of talking off the camera, is that you have learned well how to develop relationships, and you know we may be engaged in the good fight now. A lot of people, or let's say not a lot of people, but some may burn bridges as a result of that fight. But it doesn't work that way, does it, Brad? You gotta, you may disagree on this issue, but there's going to be many issues we agree on, and finding that kind of that spot, that median ground that says, I'm going to keep the relationship solid, even though we may not necessarily agree on that. That's the key to success, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't fight yesterday's battle today, because in this business, your enemy in one issue is going to be your biggest supporter or partner in the next. I used to tell people on our staff in the governor's office when I was working for Governor Reeves that, in campaigns you make war with your enemy, but in governing you make love to them. Because yeah. I mean, we're there for a purpose, and you're not going to get anything accomplished by not trying to find common ground. And I think when we look for it, common ground's there. And infrastructure is a good example. I don't know of anybody in state government that doesn't believe we should provide for our state's transportation system. But we have to be able to do the conversation about, all right, what's the method we're going to use to provide for that? And I think in the past, we've made a mistake by everybody automatically jumping to the fuel tax and saying we ought to increase the fuel tax. Well, I don't think that's the answer. I don't think that that's a sustainable answer. So let's start with what revenue we have, and let's start with how we're using our revenue, and let's look at it from as much as we can, a business standpoint, and see if we can't come up with something that we can get to a majority of the members of the legislature, along with the governor, to agree as a worthwhile path to take.
Yeah, you have to be in that position. I can think back, and I won't name names, but I can think back where there have been executive directors in MDOT roles that have been, fiercely combative. Let's put it that way. And you can find some success being that way, but if you're going to be there for the long haul, if you're going to really align people strategically around the direction of this organization, you can't get there by burning bridges. You have to get there by building bridges. That is for sure, literally and figuratively. Hey, when we come back from after this break, I want Brad to talk to us a little bit more about the employees of MDOT, big organization over this entire state. We'll talk a little bit more about the leadership of the organization and the incredibly dedicated employees who work at MDOT. We'll see you. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. I have my friend Brad White, who is the Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Transportation. Brad, when I read this statement, the Mississippi Department of Transportation is responsible for providing safe intermodal transportation network that is planned, designed, constructed, and maintained in an effective, cost-efficient, and environmentally sensitive manner. It just seems so easy. It's not. There's a lot in that statement, isn't there?
There is. That's our mission statement, and that our folks, that's posted throughout our agency all over the state and office buildings, so it's always in front of our employees' minds. And but it's a big task. It's a big job to try to do.
Yeah, and it's important that you align your employees around this. But you said it already. There are a lot of dedicated employees who work with MDOT, and then that by extension into contractors that you work with. I mean, it takes a lot to make it work. But just in terms of employees, how many employees do you have?
Around 2,650 employees in the state, and that's down considerably from where we were when I worked here for Commissioner Hall years ago. It was north of 3,000. Yeah. MDOT's one thing that makes us a little unique in state government is we're one of the agencies that it would actually make sense to have more employees because of the type of work we do. If you look at our maintenance crews, when I worked at MDOT 25 years ago, all 82 counties had a crew of maintenance workers that were there if there was a guardrail or a pothole or a culvert that needed cleaning out. If there was a tornado or a hurricane coming, people that needed to be out clearing the roads. Our maintenance crews have dwindled down to the size now to where the floating crews are having to cover a much bigger geographic area than before, which impacts our ability to get to everything that we need to get to as quickly as possible. When the 87 4-lane program was passed, most of the pre-construction work that was done to get those projects ready for construction was done in-house by roadway design, our bridge, different engineers that we had that worked for MDOT to do that. Because of our pay inequities over the years, we began losing a lot of engineers to where now MDOT spends about $70 million a year on engineering consulting firms to do that same work. And a fraction of that money, we could build our staff back and do it in-house. But I'm happy to tell you that the legislature has seen that and have been very supportive of us over the last couple of years, and we've been able to readjust salaries to start building back a team of people to do things in a more effective and cost-effective way for the taxpayers. So I'm excited about where we're going with that.
And Brad, the other thing you do is you build institutional knowledge when you do that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Time, it's significant. I mean, there's economies of scale that come from that alone.
Very good point. Again, going back 25 years when I was here before, if you went around the 10th floor, the average tenure of those engineers were probably somewhere between 37 and 40 years, and it's not nearly like that now, to where you have the people around that know where all the bodies are buried, so to speak, and that was there when the manuals were written and that actually wrote them. So being able to build back the institutional knowledge with the quality people we have, I think is very, very important, and I think it's going to be proven over time, if the legislature will stick with me on this, that it will allow us to have a more equipped, more efficient agency in the future.
One of the things, this speaks to something I did as a CEO when I went in to run a company, or we were doing a merger of two companies, or whatever the situation might be. I always said, okay, what are the critical core capabilities we need? What is at the heart of what we do? What are the skill sets that are required? And we're going to outsource as much as we possibly can, but on our core team, what is it that people come to us for? What is it we have to specialize in doing? And what kind of thing that snowballs over time in terms of experience, and as we pointed out just a few minutes ago, institutional knowledge, what are those things? And you would think that road design and all those things would be clearly a core asset that has to be part of who you are.
Right. Our ability to inspect projects. We have to hire a lot of consultants that do even those types of work for the department on the projects that we have, that inspect them to make sure that they're being built by the contractor to the standards that we have to follow. Years ago, a lot of that was done in-house. Now we have to farm that out at what I believe to be a greater cost to the taxpayer. Now, we're very thankful for these partners in the private sector that we work with, and look forward to continuing relationships with them that allow us to deliver the product. But that withstanding, I do think that there's opportunity there for us to make the work a little more cost effective and more efficient by building up our own core team here, as long as we can provide data that shows we can do it better and less expensive.
Yeah, I can only imagine. You're getting the job done. That's important. But I can only imagine how much more efficient it would be to do it internally, as opposed to paying a company that has to build in their profits and whatever. I know they don't necessarily like hearing this conversation, but at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create an MDOT that is efficiently done. You want as much money as you possibly can going to maintenance of roads and bridges and building roads and bridges.
That's exactly.
Every other time you spend on something else, it's money taken away from those things.
Exactly right.
Hey, listen, Brad, I hope you have a great holiday. You and your family have a great Christmas and a great New Year. I look forward to chatting with you during the legislative session to see how we're doing.
Well, thank you, Ricky. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Merry Christmas to y'all as well.
You bet. This has been Brad White, the Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Transportation, MDOT. A really, really important organization in the state of Mississippi. Listen, have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.